All right, back for another YouTube talk show, the Intverse show here. Today I have Sheldon Deere. He's a developer for Omni Network. Easy for me to say. How are you today, sir?
Doing very well. Still recovering from ETHDenver, still staying busy, and still just juggling my ass off. Not sure if I can
Excellent.
say that, sorry, but yeah, it's been very busy. It's been a very active ETHDenver for Bitcoin.
Excellent. Yeah, you actually, I think you and I have done one or two podcasts before, and you're very good at for jumping my question. So that was actually one of the things I was going to ask you about leading off here, just to warm up. Well, how was ETH Denver? Did you speak there?
I did not have any official speaking engagements at the expo, but we were featured at many different Bitcoin side events. We hosted the opening night party with Nolcha, who's a very like Bitcoin oriented events company. And yeah, the overall reception was really, really good. I went through the expo floor and talked to basically everybody who I thought was capable of integrating a Bitcoin full node and all of the other data that could possibly come with that. And they all had some appetite for it. You know, it's not just the Ethereum Foundation having like a headache and a dichotomy at the same time. It's that people are seeing the value in Bitcoin more actively from the Ethereum community, and it's not just wrapped. So I think it was a really, really positive ETHDenver for Bitcoin in particular, not just because the events were good, but because the ETH audience was a little bit more receptive to some, standard stuff that you and I have been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, I know that you and I, we've been friends now for probably 3 or 4 years. Time flies, and we don't talk every day, but we talk, once in a while. And I think we're both pretty large proponents of a multi-chain future. I don't know if you're still on that, in that mindset. Yeah,
100%.
yeah, you are. Okay, good. So, I don't know. Would you like to just give everybody like a couple minute rundown of like what you've done in the past and like what you're working on right now with Omnity?
Sure, sure. So I have more than 12 years of cybersecurity trenches under my belt. At that same time, I did a lot of blockchain research. A lot of what I did was just packet captures and more like conventional, sort of security review of node software. So when someone would publish a Bitcoin fork in 2014 and I thought it was funny or interesting, I would run it in my home, sort of computers, which are not enterprise grade, and then just see what kind of network traffic would come out of those devices, see who would start broadcasting to my IP address because I had broadcasted from my IP address and things like that. So I really come from a very, very network engineering focused background. And over the past, I would say 7 or 8 years, that's led to a greater focus on reversing of, looking what part of the code executed that call to that IP address and why. Um, I'll admit that I'm still not the most professional out there, and there are better people who you should hire for those kind of engagements because I'm just doing too many things. But it's still a great passion of mine to pull up and test blockchains and try to see how they work and what makes their sort of like novel development worthwhile. So at Omnity, I actually take a completely non-development role. I get to be a complete reverser. I attack our products as they come out. I help with product development, and that means that I'm part of the decision making when we get into some like larger risk management or larger capital decisions about product in the future. But it also means that as product comes to release and as features come to release, that maybe new UAT needs to be developed, new testing and all kind of like more conventional stuff has to be out there. So I can take a very like straight and narrow cybersecurity level approach to Bitcoin, and I think that's productive sometimes. But I really like coming from, a strong field of philosophy where it's not necessarily one person, one CPU. But one on-chain action is in itself independent. It's not the same thing as, rating a bot comment or as rating an individual who hires bots. They're all like very different scales of data of, oh, hey, this is an indicator about some kind of activity. So I've been trying to zoom out a little bit recently, as it probably sounds like I am.
Mhm.
But at the same time, that comes with really grounded, like I need data for my decisions. I still have to make informed decision making based on data. And right now, that data is that the runes market is growing, that the runes software ord is keeping up and moving faster than some protocol development and other platforms. And that's been really, really excellent. I'll nerd out about that with you in a moment. But let me pause there for brevity because yeah, we do a lot. with multi-chain Bitcoin assets at Omnity, and it's kind of a wide scope these days.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about runes. So, like, tell everyone who doesn't know already. I mean, runes are still fairly new. So, what is Omnity working on as far as runes?
So our sort of top offering, or the main thing where I got people biting the bait at ETHDenver, was our free runes indexer, which is just getting data as soon as it shows up in the Bitcoin mempool in literally less than 1 second, and then offering that data available through smart contract calls on ICP. So that's been our multi-chain thesis recently, is to use ICP's tech stack as a place to take advantage of Bitcoin full nodes, mempool monitoring, submitted transactions. They're broadcasted, but they think of it like an RPC. And then to sort of also be looking at the ORD software and how we can use that in tandem with Bitcoin full nodes that are already taking actions on chain. So in runes themselves, there are, I would say, significant protocol updates at least once a quarter, usually 2 or 3 times. And we have done a pretty good job of keeping up with that. But our next venture on that front is sort of twofold. One part is PSBT based DeFi, where people can, utilize completely just Bitcoin network without knowing ICP details and saying, "Oh, hey, I just want to execute activities from Bitcoin nodes in some programmatic fashion." That's doable without gas from a point of proof of stake chain. That's capable without some other wallet address structure, because there is a property to understand sats in context with these compute cycles in ICP. So that's been our thesis, because we can run like clients for Ethereum, for Base, for Solana, for many other popular blockchains on ICP, and then pair that directly with the Bitcoin node data that's on the same chain. So the sort of like product research phase that we're in is for Ordinals right now. We were a little bit slow to that market because it's difficult to manage as structured data. And we know that if we take on one art like Ordinals, that there really has to be an intelligent thesis for it. Because if you say like, "Oh, hey, your Ordinal can be on our platform, but these features aren't going to work," like that's not acceptable to artists. That's not acceptable to us. If you're going to do interesting things like recursion and parent-child relationships and all this other stuff with Bitcoin art, we want to make sure that that is not just supported, but natively possible. So we're going to make sure that feasibility is at the forefront of what we're working on. But right now, that means using the very easy to manage hot data from runes,
Mhm.
and also in the long term, offering more of that like rich data from the ORD indexer.
You mentioned the ICP, so are you guys working on like a cross-chain DEX, sort of like something that um, Near Intense is chain abstraction, or Thor chain has done, or anything? Is it like that? Is that what you're building, or is that like maybe something in the future?
So we're a little bit nervous to manage a chain abstraction product because it requires so much trust and so much sort of interaction with retail. Like you still might need to have, account level support to reset people's passwords and stuff like that. And that's just not what we like to maintain as a company. But I would say that it's a contrast to those products, because where the chain abstraction products will say, "Hey, you can come to us, and then we've already got all this under the hood. Don't worry about it." By contrast, we're very much like, "Hey, these things are all right at the forefront. They're in plain text. You can check this information publicly." Like the DEX that we've built that supports PSBT based swaps without deposit or withdrawal, that's completely oriented on Bitcoin. Like when people connect to and use that, they don't know that ICP exists. And that's ultimately just a very, very small abstraction layer that's narrowed just to that PSBT product. When they come to the bridge that we offer, they will see that you have to connect two different wallets or set what the destination address is on the far end. And that's not great for a super hyper streamlined user experience, but it has been a really helpful user experience tool for folks who want that in their app and don't necessarily want to run it themselves. So the bridge is truly a product that we run and expect to sort of like barely make our money back on, which is kind of how it works. Excuse me, sorry, I was getting a call. See if I can make
You're
that go
fine.
away. Apologies, just 1 second. I accidentally picked up and hung up, so I should tell him.
You're good. We have an editor.
Ah, okay.
We're fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, we were talking about the Omni bridge. So the Omni bridge today is focused entirely on runes assets, and there is fungible Bitcoin that goes to osmosis. We're part of the Alloyed BTC program over there. There's fungible Bitcoin that goes to Ton and also, I believe, to Sui. But we're trying to focus primarily on the properties of bringing Bitcoin assets, specifically runes, to other chains, and that means that people do kind of need to feel that they're moving from one environment to the other. This is not a black box DEX. There is no like secret authority linchpin. What we're doing is we're asking people to take our deployer and sort of communicate with their own HTLC, their own hash time lock contract on the Bitcoin L1. When they lock up those assets, we are a counterparty key to those assets. So although we can't take them ourselves, we are sort of like requiring that, hey, you satisfy the protocol requirements before you unlock those assets again on the L1. And that just leaves a lot of flexibility as token wrapping goes. And because it is a deployer managed by that person who brings their own Bitcoin assets to the bridge, they're never in our custody, they're never in our control. The closest thing that we could do to rug is lose the keys, and that's ultimately not possible thanks to ICP. They have some key rotation structures and other things where they could take a governance action long term and sort of beat us out. If we died and everything just stopped moving, God forbid, right now, there is some places where you would need to sort of fill up gas. They're called cycles on ICP that would have to be paid in order to maintain that cross-chain interoperability, to maintain those light clients that we've built into ICP. But we're relatively confident that if we keep doing this sort of like once a year and once every 6 months sort of review and security iteration and refinement, that we're going to keep minimizing the threat surface over and over and over again. That is the width of this bridge. So ultimately, we are not in the chain abstraction business, but we think that people in the future who want to do that and want to develop a runes product and also want to have some functionality on multiple chains, that they'll do that. They'll build an abstraction product with our tooling. And Odin.Fun has effectively done that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that runes product.
No, I haven't used
We
it.
could talk about that for just a quick second.
Yeah,
So
good.
Odin.Fun is a technical partner of ours, and they're a pump fund, a token launchpad for runes. So the idea is that if you beat their 80% bonding curve, if you fundraise well enough for your concept, then your token will be etched onto the Bitcoin blockchain as a rune by the ICP smart contracts that sort of recognize, hey, this action, is ready. It's time to take that action. This has been prepaid. The gas is here. The sats are here. Etch these sats and then distribute these runes to these wallet holders. So it is a pretty cool function to see because that environment, that pump fun launchpad, it's kind of like an app chain built into ICP. It is a separate environment, but it really does abstract away all of this logic. There is no like, hey, please click here to mint and all of this. It's operated in the background because of those Bitcoin full nodes on ICP.
It sounds sort of like a more. I've never looked at like exactly how Shapeshift work, but it sounds kind of. Is it more? Is it sort of like that because you don't have to connect the wallet? It sounds like, or to actually deposit. You're just using the protocol to swap. It sounds like, without giving up your keys. Essentially, I don't know. Is that a bad analogy?
No, I don't think so. And you do need to bring a Bitcoin wallet to use our platform.
Okay.
But in order to use Odin Fund, I think you can also fund it with Phantom, and they're working on some other interesting Solana interoperability stuff with us. They're definitely trying to make it as little of the Web3 sort of pain as possible. The usual onboarding of, hey, here's your mnemonic.
Right.
Trying to avoid these kinds of things. Um, but the abstraction of it, I think for Odin Fund does still include the responsibility of sort of having a wallet and being
Okay.
ready to receive a rune. I should also briefly mention that Phantom may become a Bitcoin wallet in a bigger way in the immediate future. Some people who have Phantom may have noticed that you can put Bitcoin into Phantom. but they also have taproot addresses, so they can support ordinals, they can support runes, and we've offered them some free infrastructure to take that load off of them, and possibly accept millions and millions of cached calls per day from Phantom wallet users to support that runes data. Because right now you can actually hold your runes and your ordinals in that wallet address on Phantom, but you won't be able to see it because it's not part of their UI.
Oh, interesting. And not to get too off track here, but is Phantom an open source wallet?
I believe they are partially open source. I believe they've open sourced some of their work, but
Okay.
I'm sure a lot of it isn't, and I'm moderately comfortable with that for one reason.
Uh-huh.
It's that they are the largest monthly active user wallet in crypto at the moment. They're much bigger than MetaMask right now. And that means that even if I don't like some of the sort of transparency practices that might go with their release schedule,
Mhm.
if I'm going to get folks to like entertain or accept a more open source wallet, I got to give them a sort of a path to that, a bridge to that, right? Upheaval is usually not the best way to convince, because you can still use Soulflare and Bonfida and many other very legacy Solana wallets, but everyone's choosing the user-friendly version or the sort of business tailored version because Solana is a place where we don't think about security most of the time. That's a very, very easy way to describe the environment that is Solana.
Fair enough. There's a lot of degen play going on Solana right now. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I was just curious. I had heard recently it wasn't completely open source, so I knew you were the guy to ask. As far as like scaling Bitcoin, we're like what are we're over 16 years in now, which is just like absolutely insane to me. I don't know. I guess I'm getting old. Maybe you're getting a little older too. I can't believe it sometimes. What made you so attracted to Omni that you think like now's the time to scale Bitcoin? Because there for a while, that idea was kind of dead. So where do you like what made you like so excited about it?
So we come from an app chain thesis, and I should disclose for anyone who's watching maybe this and the first podcast that we did together that I am effectively working for the same company and have not left that company. That company said, "Hey, we all simultaneously agree that app chains as a blockchain thesis for, hey, Bitcoin is going to do X, and some things that Bitcoin doesn't do shouldn't try to be forced there. We should have these other validator sets, these other smaller systems that are very use case specific, that are instantially specific to a certain product and design." We effectively have maintained that thesis in going back to Bitcoin because number one, that's a way that we can make other environments that integrate directly with Bitcoin. And number two, because that is a lot of how the sort of compromise on ICP works, where you have this kind of like global validator set, which is proof of stake, and then you also have an independent validator subset called a subnet that is also proof of stake at a lower level and is higher in number, but also has specialization. So in our case, the most important specialization is the Bitcoin subnet, where there are Bitcoin full nodes and all that other stuff we discussed earlier. But ultimately, that's the valuation or product path that we saw from others that made us say, okay, we can retain our app chain thesis where we want to do high levels of specialization in weird non-proof of work blockchains for a very, very focused reason. But that doesn't change the fact that Bitcoin as an L1, as the oldest blockchain, is still going to keep up its rigidity, be used primarily for payments. When it comes to financialization, it's still primarily dependent on HTLCs and some esoteric cryptographic activity that is conducted by people being active on chain. Frost, Noist, Roast, these are very useful cryptographic primitives and principles, but you can apply those things all day long. Getting them to fit into somebody's product and business, it's difficult. And honestly, Bitcoin needs more products and businesses that will help the motivation for it to scale. Because I think that whether we are, sort of confined by block size or not is irrelevant. There needs to be business application for a public money network. Otherwise, it is just existential, and we are on a very, very long road to geopolitics.
Mhm.
And I think that that road to geopolitics has shortened greatly. So the fastest way to kind of address that as an industry and a culture is to say, okay, we do want to scale Bitcoin for art. We do want to scale Bitcoin for tokens. We do want reasonable trust mechanisms why this stuff should happen here. But it should also co-play with this other billion-dollar market of demand that has been really struggling under the pressure of venture capital, under the pressure of changing market focuses, and also under the pressure of geopolitics.
Yeah, that was sort of what I was going to talk about next. Like, as far as someone coming from the old guard, I don't know if you consider yourself a cypherpunk or not. I guess uh, I would say you pretty much are, but whatever. Yeah, I was. You're
Thanks,
old
bud.
school. You're from the old school. So, what do you think about like governments now getting on board with Bitcoin and as far as talking about sort of losing a bit of the decentralized nature of this entire space. I guess we've made it. We've made it. They want to be in our club, you know. It was such a fringe club for so long, and now we're the cool guys.
That's a fun way to say it. I've heard it framed as Sailor as the final boss, and I think that's very funny also because he could easily swing out and start his own software-defined country right now if he wanted to. I think it wouldn't be that hard, given the amount of Bitcoin he has and given the amount of risk he's clearly willing to take on.
Yeah.
But I think he's a really great beacon for what we can expect from institutions to sort of see Bitcoin as an asset in their own view. And, in a lot of ways, that means that we'll lose the benefits of true layer one interactivity.
Mhm.
But it also means that, being willing to learn how that goes, to be patient enough to, inscribe something, to be patient enough to do Bitcoin L1 transactions, whether SegWit or not, you're still waiting 10 minutes. I think there's a growing culture that wants this, that accepts this, that sees that the original promise of Bitcoin was different. And it doesn't mean that there won't be larger market forces from people who say number go up or who say, look at this chart. And I think that those will still be the dominant market forces for quite a while. But the contrast to that is that a vacuum sort of attracts attention to itself.
Mhm.
Whether you're talking about a power vacuum and someone's going to come in and try to absorb that power, or there's an ideological vacuum of like, wait a minute, wasn't Bitcoin a thing that we weren't supposed to touch because it was bad? Why is it suddenly good now? People just asking that question to me, I feel like that's enough to sort of retain the original thesis of why we came here.
Mhm.
And I mean, I hope it's not in bad taste on your podcast, but I will still donate resources across OFAC lines because I don't think Palestinians deserve what they're going through right now. I think that there's a lot of Bitcoiners who still have their mind on, being independent from geopolitical actions in general and saying, hey, my money is my money. If you don't want dollars to go to X, then maybe I do, and that's my decision. But from a market standpoint, it's definitely that, the little kids table has become crowded because it's not the little kids table anymore. There is these people who call themselves the adults in the room, and they have a much more stability focus, risk focus, almost product focus, but not really. And it really is because of the over financialization of cryptocurrency as an industry. And I think that also has a similar pendulum like effect coming back in the other direction that people are asking again, like, hey, why isn't Uber more transparent as an on-chain business? Hey, why isn't the, public water system that's oversubscribed out in the Rockies in the US, why isn't that part of a transparency system where people are reporting at a supply chain level to public entities? Because hey, if water is overtaken on my property, if I take more than I'm sort of due or dibsed on or whatever it's called, then that affects the people downstream. Do they know that it was me or do they know that it was my neighbor upstream? There's still a lot of very valid blockchain use cases that I think are struggling to reach either financialization or like just fitment, just real solution engineering.
Right.
Um, but all of these kind of larger market ignorances, I don't want to say failures, but sort of just excitement, these market perspectives, it leaves a hole that makes people ask, like, hey, weren't we talking about blockchains for supply chain a couple years ago? What happened to that? Like, did something change with supply chains? No, we just got distracted.
Wow, that was honestly probably one of the best answers I've ever had in all of my shows. You
You're
hit
saying
property
that.
rights, you hit like on the foundation of why I got into this space, the ability to transact and like help people across borders that are in need of help. You like nailed everything there in one. Yeah, well done. I have really nothing to say about that, but
I'm gonna call myself a cypherpunk now. Thank you so much.
yeah, that was definitely a cypherpunk answer there for sure. I appreciate that one a lot. We only have like time for like maybe a couple other more questions here, so I definitely appreciate you coming on today. I know you're a busy guy, and I hope to talk to you again in the future. I know I will offline or off these, but maybe I'll be able to talk to you again in like Q4 or something on another talk show. But where do you think we are like I know you probably don't love this question, but where do you think we are in the midst of this cycle? Do you think that this might be like a cycle that we've topped early, or do you think it actually could be like one where it seems like what the last two have topped in Q4. If we're just going to talk about like Bitcoin and this entire market basically topping out. Um, where do you think we are in terms of that? Do you think we have a lot of legs left in this one, or where do you think we are?
So I think we have a lot of legs left, and I've been of the super cycle perspective for a while. Super cycle doesn't mean go up only. It means that whenever we come down, there is not the true crash that is needed to shake out the sort of low trust, low certainty holders. But I think that there is an important contrast of, like building, crashing, and building support, building, crashing, and building support. That's still very super cycle to me. But I think the contrast is the Western business cycle that has largely failed to recognize that it's in a recession right now. Germany is claiming that they have economic contraction. The United States is just straight up pretending, and the unemployment numbers are kind of a farce. They don't take into gig economy framing or contracting or many other things. So I think that we are in a super cycle, but I think it's not going to feel like it for quite a while. I think that it would be very funny if it took another 5 years for this to happen, so we can just have, a perfect like depression every 100 years. Like that would be very amusing. But at the same time, I think it is very likely that what's going to happen for Bitcoin over the next few years is that number one, the sort of like high risk, large volume of the market, token launchers, pump funds, whoever.
Mhm.
I think that will sort of continue and establish a more active baseline when it comes to monthly active users, total volume, et cetera. We've already gone through dog, cat, and most of the other kind of like expectable simpleton concepts that we could meme and tokenize, even though those things are not real tokenization. I
Right.
think that that's going to continue. I've seen a lot of motivation for another product arc where we see blockchain use cases that actually make sense. And to me, that is only one step up in the market where it's still very oriented to social trust and
Mhm.
hoping that the person who said they're going to build that product actually builds it and actually does the money, does with the investment what they say they will. But I think there is a tier above that, which is on-chain businesses. I'm seeing a new era of on-chain businesses that are looking exclusively to manage, contracts on Bitcoin. They do not want to do proof of stake blockchain networks. They want to say, hey, Bitcoin is the legal asset that we're able to mix into our existing financialization of insurance and risk. So we want to only operate that on chain. I feel like that's kind of the tier above that, even though there's a big gap between them. And then the final tier being, truly getting more focused about Bitcoin Core and, letting Bitcoin Core development be, sort of a core thesis and core discussion for the industry because it has not been for quite a few years now. So I think the super cycle is real, but it also still includes lots of pain. And unfortunately, it is still pretty subject to, traditional business cycles.
It is interesting as well that you noted that you think we may be or we are in a recession. That we're talking about this and Bitcoin's still trading like at $90,000 as we record this on March 5th of 2025. So it's pretty wild that how durable Bitcoin has really been and like it just seems to keep on ticking. So. Last thing, sir, like, what are you excited about with Omnity this year? Like the remainder of the year, if you want to just like plug anything or share your handles here, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, come find us, OMNITY Network, on Twitter, and our website is also omnity.network. I'm excited that we are doing product market research on ordinals because I have had to tell people for a while, like, hey, runes are great, but we're not an ordinals company. So we're conducting some research on that. That's going to be great. And there's a lot of partnerships that I unfortunately can't leak on your show. But I have to tell you, there's a lot of people who are interested in the same kind of infrastructure they got during the ERC 20 days that made adopting an asset easy, functional, acceptable, not a big stretch. And we're going to keep being a Bitcoin data services provider for that. And those services are completely oriented by automation on chain. So don't feel like you're paying me. We'd be happy to discuss with anyone who hears this that, if you want to do something interesting with Bitcoin that requires more programmability than belongs at the base layer, then I will happily redirect you back to Frost, Noist, two-party HTLCs and all kind of other things if that's the right solution for you. So we're just excited to discuss more of those things in the future.
Excellent. I'll look forward to that on Twitter or wherever you guys announce it. Maybe it'll be later in the year and you'll announce it on here if I get lucky. Uh, Sheldon, thank you for coming on, sir. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Make sure you give him a follow, his company a follow, follow Initverse for everything that we're doing. Subscribe to this channel and hang on one second, sir. I'll say a proper goodbye.